Welcome back to our Wealthy Mindset, where we talk about all things money, mindset, and business. It's your host, Cindy, your fractional CFO and financial bestie. And today's episode is going to be a little different. And I know you're going to feel it in your body. Today, I'm sitting down with Nicola Harris. She is a somatic certified coach, business mentor, educator, and the host of the Economy of Soul podcast. And we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed enough in the financial world or the business world. We're talking about how your nervous system is influencing your business strategy, your income, and your ability to be safe with money. If you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things but still feel anxious, avoidant, or burnt out, this conversation is going to land with you. We talk about how burnout sneaks in even when you're making consistent income, why regulating your nervous system is a missing link in most business strategies, and what it looks like to actually build a business that supports your body and your bigger vision. Nicola has a way of explaining things that feel like a deep exhale. This episode is one of those pause and reflect moments, and I hope you give yourself the space as you listen today. So let's get into it. Hi, Nicola. Thanks for joining me on her Wealthy Mindset today.
I'm so thrilled to have this conversation.
Could you share a little bit about what you do and how you support your clients?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I am now a certified somatic coach. And what that essentially means is that I utilize the nervous system in terms of strategically aligning you into your business. So for years and years, I've been in business now for, gosh, it's been about 23 years now. And I often used strategy as like the way to help clients grow their businesses, which is like typically how we've been taught to grow our businesses, is
Yes.
that we look at a set of to-dos, we look at the action steps that we really just need to close the gap to get us from where we are to where we want to be, right? Like we've all kind of been taught that. And even, as a young 22-year-old, when I was first starting out, that's kind of how I grew my business. I was like, there's just a set of things that I should get done. But what I realized is that as I was growing my business and as I was going through my career, I was also on a journey of self-discovery in terms of like my personal development and looking at a lot of my own shadows and my limiting beliefs and things that were holding me back as just a human being. And what I realized about, it was probably really came to focus about 5 years ago, was that the conversations I was having with my clients were often really rooted in what was holding them back in terms of why they kept repeating these limiting patterns and these behaviors that were keeping them stuck, were keeping them small, and were really like not allowing them to step into the full power of who they were. And I noticed that a lot of the strategies that we would build and often try to implement were not really working because their nervous systems were not prepared and poised to be able to hold the level of success that we were going to call in through the strategy. So I kind of had this like light bulb, like, oh my gosh. So this whole entire time, our nervous systems kind of are the ones who are in charge through this notion that we are held in this posture of whatever it is. Maybe it's scarcity, maybe it is smallness, because it doesn't feel safe in our bodies to expand beyond where we currently are. And so I started to really do the work, deep dive the work myself personally first. And then I thought, no, this is definitely something. So I decided to get certified. So I really love to blend as a business mentor the strategy, because it's still important to have the strategy to move yourself forward, but incorporate the somatic piece as well, where we really work on looking at where is your nervous system holding you? Is it holding you in overworking? Is it holding you in that hustle mode? Is it holding you in scarcity? Are you creating patterns of, overspending or hoarding so that you can't really create the impact that it is that you're here to create? And so as I started to blend those two things together, it became so apparent. So many, especially women, just struggle with the internal piece of building a nervous system that feels resourced to be able to have the impact and the success that we really truly want.
That's amazing. And I feel like a lot of coaches and like the online world doesn't really talk about like the internal. I feel
No.
like a lot of women that I work with, they want the 50K months, 100K months, but it's like they don't feel safe holding that much money.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? And even just saying the word, does that feel safe to hold? They're like, what? I don't even understand what that means because
Right.
we have just been conditioned. And really, when you look at the online world or even the business world, it's never about the internal landscape. It's just about what we're seeking externally in terms of, what's the next thing that we have to do? Do we need to sign up for this thing or that thing? Like, what more do we need externally? Very rarely are we blending that in internally. And so it's a really interesting shift to start to even notice like what feels safe in my body and what is sort of holding me in a posture is what I call it, a posture of rigidity or a posture of like, it's almost like an internal glass ceiling, a glass wall that keeps us from being able to move into that next, whatever it is, that next evolution of where we want to go.
How do you work through that? Like with myself, I've been looking
Mm,
more into mindset, doing like EFT tapping, like breath work, but sometimes you feel like that's not even enough, or you feel like
mm-hmm,
it's not really making a difference. So, like, what
mm-hmm.
kind of steps do you support your clients with to make sure that they're making like lasting change and not just like a
Yeah.
quick fix?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the quick fix because I feel like, maybe in the moment it feels good, but really building the sustainability, which is my whole hope is that you're building a sustainable business and you're building a sustainable nervous system to be able to continue to grow. Um, it's sort of personalized, so it's not like a one size fits all, but I do a lot of deep visualization in terms of meeting yourself exactly where that edge is. So developing an awareness around what is sort of driving those decisions right now or those patterns and really coming face to face with it in terms of just saying here, so let's say it's a scarcity mindset or it's overspending. We're going to meet that edge so that you are very clear in your body what feels safe and where you start to feel unsafe in there. And so the expansion process requires you to go into a mode of unsafety because we're expanding. So it's going to be uncomfortable no matter what. Like we've heard
Right.
that 1,000 times that are, getting outside of our comfort zone feels scary. However, we do it in a way that still feels safe because we're not going from 0 to 60 overnight. So, like you say, like 50, 100K months, it's like
Yes.
if they're not even making 5K a month, going from 5K to 50K, that is going to throw you into dysregulation essentially overnight. And because you're not going to be able to hold that, you're most likely not going to be able to repeat it, or you're going to sort of repeat it and then you're going to end up just spending it or causing some other chaos so that it's not, you're not in a thriving mode. You're still just in that survival. So it's about looking at many different things, but the key awareness is really understanding where that line is for you. So the best way I describe it, and when I think about it in my own body, is that I do think of it of like, where do I hit the line? How far can I go before it says no more? And so it's like once you can meet that there, you can begin to work through some of the exercises to be able to understand the root of it and to
Mhm.
then be able to navigate beyond it. So I think breath work is really important. I do breath work all the time. EFT tapping, also love that. I map things in. I map your next success level often through tapping because you can physically feel it in your body. But we also do some very like unconventional things. Like we will hold the tension in our body, and anyone who's been in a group setting with me online has experienced it before. But we move through physical postures where we hold the tension and then we essentially move through it. So we sometimes will punch through it. A lot of
Wow.
my clients will scream. Yeah, it's somewhat primal sometimes when you start to get into your body and allow your mind to no longer control how the output needs to come through. But we get into sort of the nuance of your body enough that you can begin to feel like where that tension point really is and where you can sort of find that next breakthrough, that next level of where it is that feels good enough that you are expanding, but not so far that you're throwing yourself into dysregulation.
Do you feel like you have to be open-minded to doing this type of work too?
Mm. Oh yeah. Because I think like what's so fascinating, and again, we live in a society and we've been conditioned to really work from our minds,
Right.
right? Like our minds have been the key factor in all things. Like we think our way to our next level. We work on our mindset.
Hmm.
When you move into the body, it's a very different experience. And at first I thought, this is wild. This is wild because it isn't something that I even felt like I fully understood as I was starting to allow some of these walls to really break down within myself. People have very different reactions when they start to go into somatics. Some people will shake. Some
Right.
people will sob. Some people will be very still. It's very hard. There's no sort of prescription in terms of what your body is going to do as it's recalibrating to a new level. But letting go of the control through the thinking is almost part of the healing process and part of the expansion process. We let our bodies lead us. We turn our minds off, or we quieten them enough that we can get into really the depth of who we are here, which is driving our minds anyways. Like our nervous system is like a two-way highway, right? It's feeding
Right.
information of safety up to our brains. Our brains are being triggered and going, ooh, we need to have a fight, flight, fawn, freeze response, whichever one is your favorite in any given moment. And then, so our bodies are really the thing that are informing all of that in the first place. But we're walking around from the neck up pretty much, just pretending
Yeah.
we're floating heads, right? So the invitation is really to get into the body, and that absolutely requires an openness to just allow what needs to come through, which sometimes can be very scary for some people. It's you don't really know what's going to come until you start allowing yourself to go there. But for me and for many of my clients, it's felt like a homecoming. All of a sudden, the truth of who you are and the truth of the experiences that you've had, and maybe some of the trauma that you need to unpack, all of that is impacting us on a day-to-day basis anyways. But once you sort of understand it, it gives you the keys to be able to then use it to, allow yourself to grow into the next level of your life.
That's so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's really powerful work.
What advice would you give like a woman that's been carrying shame around money? She wants to get to a next level. She knows she needs to do the inner work, but she doesn't really know where to
Mm-hmm.
start.
It's such a powerful question because shame, oh man, shame is a big one. And I think
Yeah.
that a lot of women, especially with money, like you must see this in your work all the time, how triggering it can be for a woman, because I think it's only really been recently that we've even been trusted to have money of our own, right? Or to be responsible for money. And there's a lot that can really go with that. And shame is an interesting beast because shame often really drives us to avoid, right?
Right.
We want to just not go there. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to really take responsibility for it. And I think the biggest thing that I say with anything that you're trying to meet within yourself is that the opportunity is for you to develop and bring and lead with self-compassion first and foremost. So if we are feeling shame about money, if we are feeling shame about where we're at or how much we're making, or maybe we're now in a situation of debt or any of those things, often that shame is a story that we have told ourselves or we
Right.
have been told, right? So it could belong to us. It could be something we've told ourselves because of past mistakes, or it could be something that belonged to our parents, belonged
Hmm.
to a teacher. Like we pick up these limiting beliefs and these stories from all sorts of places.
Right.
But when we start to unpack where that story really came from and the entire intention of what it was here to serve, we can begin to ask ourselves whether or not that is true.
Hmm.
And when I find that we come to ourselves and say, is this true for me now?
Yeah.
Regardless of past experience, regardless of what I've done, yesterday or 10 years ago that I'm still holding on to, is this true for me today? And if the answer is yes, what do I need to shift in order to change that narrative? And if it's no, then let's just let that go. Let's begin the process of really letting that go and meeting the shame with self-compassion and the understanding that it kept us in a posture of safety for many years, but we are okay to leave that here now. And I mean, I think that when expansion work is a little bit different than healing work when we talk about the nervous system, there's a lot of information out there about regulating the nervous system and grounding and making sure that we're healing all of these bits and pieces, which is imperatively important to be able to sit in the expansion piece of it. But what is different about the expansion piece is that it's going to call forward all of this.
Yeah.
And you're going to utilize it in a way to feed your next level, which is, it's magnifying and it can be triggering in so many ways. But what ends up happening is that you develop this relationship with all of these parts of yourself. And we no longer have to feel embarrassed or even shameful of what has happened in the past. We instead get to use it to fuel the next version of ourselves. And the next version ends up being such a significant amplifier as we begin to really work that next level piece. Because if we know where we're going and we know, okay, this is the next level of what I'm going to achieve, we can begin to pull that next version of who we need to be to hold the responsibility of that now, which totally feels different than me, going outside and walking barefoot to ground my nervous system. Because in many ways, we have to kind of activate it a little bit. We have to kind of kick up some of the stuff that we've been carrying, some of these stories we've told ourselves in order to utilize it to fuel that next level.
I can totally relate to that. Just with myself, like being in the finance industry, I feel like I have no problem helping women through it. But with myself, I was like struggling. Like for the last 6 to 8 months, I've been doing like the inner work. And growing up, like my dad was an entrepreneur in the real estate space. So we would have money coming in all at once, periods of time where nothing would be coming in. And then that just led me to like subconsciously believing that if I have the money, I need to spend it because it can be taken away.
Yeah. Right? Like
Right.
the rewiring of that narrative is deep. It's deep work. And the thing is that it didn't even belong to you.
Right. Yeah.
It didn't belong to you. That wasn't your story. That was your dad's story,
Yeah.
right? But we absolutely subconsciously pick these up, often as children, but even still as an adult, we sometimes pick these things up, based on mistakes that we've made and things like that. And we carry it as if it's the holy truth of what's going to happen next. And you're like, what is this? When did I agree to this? When did I
Yeah.
agree to
You
this, right?
just want a healthy relationship with money.
You just want a healthy relationship. You know that you're like, hey, wait a minute, I'm an entrepreneur too. And yes, there's going to be ebbs and flows, but I can also build out a business model so that
Right.
the ebbs and flows aren't, as drastic. And I can hold the money in safety because I know that there's going to be more.
Yeah,
I can
totally.
hold the money because I'm able to create, right? And so it's wild how our bodies, and that is the thing. I mean, that's such a beautiful example, Cindy, is that your nervous system is wired around that. So what ends up happening is that you are in the posture of that, or we're in the posture of that. And what happens is that you create all sorts of chaos as soon as you start getting into consistent income, right?
Right.
It's like, it's wild how our nervous systems are informing. And again, it's happening on a completely subconscious level. So we're not aware of it. But the more that we can drive an awareness to that place to go, oh, okay, if I can meet myself in that story, if I can sit with that, younger version of myself, if we can have a conversation about how that felt absolutely terrifying as a child, or the things that were said over and over and over again in my household, we can begin to understand how we have developed a relationship with it. And that's really where the shift begins. That's really where it begins.
Would you recommend doing like journaling or like how do you like work through that? Because it's like you can think, okay, like back in childhood, this happened, that happened. But I feel like until you like
Mhm.
sit down and actually sit with it or write it out, like you don't really release it.
Yeah, no, I journaling is a massive part. I do a lot of visualizations as well. And during those visualizations, just invite, if I'm doing it one to one, then we'll talk through what's happening for you as you're in your visualization. Also, free writing, I think, is a really powerful way to, again, just quiet the mind, stop trying to control exactly the narrative that's coming out. It doesn't need to sound pretty when it's in your journal. It can just be free. You just let whatever needs to come out after you've sort of sat with it. And the thing is that what I truly believe is that while it's very important that we create space and time to sit with ourselves and to understand our truth and how these patterns are really showing up for us, what really is going to be the game changer is that you start to develop a practice of intentional noticing when the sensations are coming up in your body. So often what I do, the work that I do with clients, is we develop like this understanding of what sensations did that story feel like? Like what is actually physically happening in your body as you are placed in a situation that feels similar to what happened as a child when you were having big ups and downs and you're wanting to just do this with your money and spend it all, right?
Right.
When we can start to associate it with this actual sensation that's happening in your body in that given moment, you can stop. You can go, okay, I'm intentionally noticing that this is coming up for me right now, and I'm going to choose a different behavior.
So more
And
awareness.
it's tricky. More awareness, right? It all
Right.
comes down to awareness. It's like once we have the awareness, we can begin to build the pathway to shifting things. But you got to be prepared to have that intentional noticing piece of it being in your day-to-day life. Because while we can develop the awareness and the understanding of, that trigger or that story, being able to catch it in the moment as your body is, like, let's say, getting butterflies when you go to check your bank account,
Yeah.
you know, where you're like, wait a minute, do I really need this handbag? Like in the moments where you're like, am I intentionally choosing this or is this a pattern? That's
Or
where
just
you can
emotional
really
spending.
begin to see. Yeah, right? Exactly. That's where you can begin to feel the shifts. You go, okay, I'm going to make a different decision here. I'm going to make a decision that actually supports the version of me that wants to reach 50K months,
What are your
right?
thoughts
Because
on like
that's different.
what are your thoughts on like impulse spending on like coaches or programs? Like there's that
Mm.
rush to make a quick decision and like enroll in a program right away.
Mhm. Personally speaking, I don't love those tactics. I think that they're tactics at the end of the day. And I do understand the premise behind a lot of them. It's like, you know, really kind of allowing the person to sort of hopefully be in their gut response more than in their overthinking response. I certainly know that when I've overthought things, I'm like, oh, I should just not join that because of XYZ, but I actually really
Yeah.
did want to join it. And so the impulse is an interesting term because I think impulse isn't necessarily intentional. I can have an impulsive, quick decision that's very rooted in my gut response.
Right.
But I think a lot of the time it's sort of coming from a place of scarcity from the coach's standpoint. Of course,
Right.
there's deadlines because, things kick off, right? It's like we have a start
Right.
date. So, of course, we're going to honor the start date. But putting like this, like you've got 2 hours to make a decision, or you're 24 hours and then, this deal's gone. Sometimes I actually think that that's rooted in the coach's scarcity because they don't believe that they can sell it otherwise. So it's sometimes about, and I would say with any purchase that you're making, and I'm a big believer in making sure that you are circulating your money. I am not, save it all for, your children. but I am about making an intentional decision for your business that is in alignment with the version of where it is that you want to go. So not looking back, not looking even in the current moment, but really looking ahead to say, if I'm wanting to actively expand and grow, who do I need to become? And is that supporting the version of me that is going to allow me to really hold it? And I think that because we just don't, unfortunately, spend enough time in our bodies, a lot of the time we've lost connection to our intuition. And that,
Right.
to me, is one of the most important pieces in being a business owner, is having a deep relationship to your intuition. So as those opportunities come up, you go, let me check, let me do a gut check. It is saying 100%, this is where I need to invest. So let's go, right?
That's so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. The gut
What are
tells you
your thoughts?
everything.
What are your thoughts on like manifesting? Because a lot of times you're just thinking, I'll
Mm.
just like believe that I can have this without doing like the inner work.
Mm. So, I mean, I would say that my take on manifestation is that it actually is a co-creation internally more than it is externally. And I think that when we look at manifestation of like what's out there, it is more externally focused. It's like, let's build a vision board.
Yeah.
Let's go test drive vehicles. You know, like I watched The Secret like 100 times when I was in my early 20s, right? I mean, I'm probably dating
Yeah.
myself, but that's fine. When it first came out, I was like, I'm watching this every day. I would write the things out. I would do all of that. But what I think is really missing in that is that there is this internal relationship that needs to be built that is unfortunately attached to everything that we've talked about, those limiting beliefs, the stories that we tell ourselves. I don't think that you can just throw something on a vision board and all of a sudden feel ready to receive it. And receiving is a core component of nervous system work because so many, particularly women, struggle to receive. We
Yeah.
don't want to receive compliments. We don't, many of us don't feel worthy of even what we're charging,
Yeah. Always
and
undercharged.
yeah, right. It's a really interesting dynamic that a lot of men don't have. They're like, yeah, I'm just going to charge this. And absolutely, that's no problem. And so I think when it comes to like, let's look at what it is that we really do want to call in. And first of all, is that aligned? Is that aligned to who I am and the impact that I want to make? Or is that just something I think I need to have because everyone else has it? So it's first of all developing that sense of self and sense of sovereignty within what it is that you're calling in. And then really looking at who is it that I need to become to receive it? And am I open to that right now? Or do I need to do the internal work to ensure that I am going to become someone that is open to receive it? Receiving is, my main nervous system edge is hyper independence. And that is from a childhood of trauma and not having anyone really sort of be able to be there for me. And so I developed this sense of like, I have to do it. It's easier for me to do it on my own because then I have my own back always. And other people have let me down. But I can tell you that that is a massive problem when you're trying to receive things, because receiving is essentially opening up and saying, I am open and available for the support all around me. Whereas my hyper independence is like, I got this by myself. I don't need anyone's help. Right. And so that's a direct, like, of course, nothing on my vision board is going to come into fruition if I'm holding on to the fact that I have to do this all by myself. So it's really, I think, about looking and unpacking where we're at in that process of going, okay, I want to call this in. I absolutely want 50K months. And that's great. That's 100% okay. You want 100K months, you want 400K months. The number itself doesn't really matter. It's about acknowledging where you're at right now and where and who you need to become in order to actually receive that. Receiving, being in 400K months, the responsibility is different. And it's not necessarily that we're always afraid of the money. Sometimes we're afraid of the responsibility that would come when we arrive there. And so our nervous systems go, we're already too busy.
Yeah.
We don't want to hustle anymore. So we're hustling for, 7K. Like, can you imagine what we're going to have to do at 400K? Like, our bodies are going, no, 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 right? And so we have to look at the version of who we need to be in order to receive what it is that we're wanting to call in. And I think that it requires a different version of you every single time, right?
Right.
50K months versus even 100K months. There is a different level of leadership that's going to be required of you, both from an internal and external standpoint, that will shift the way that you can receive that.
That totally makes sense.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of inner work.
Lot of inner work. I mean, I would say that it's mostly inner work, and it's interesting because the work that I've done in the past, a lot of the time I would go very deep and re-architect out businesses. So I would look at all of their operational systems. I would look at their teams. I did a lot of the hiring, a lot of the firing. Sometimes if we were vamping their team, and it was so interesting. I didn't know then, I wish I did. I didn't know then the impact that growth has on the business owner. And I don't think there's enough out there in terms of understanding how volatile growth can feel if you're not primed and poised and resourced in your nervous system to be able to hold it. I built one business very quickly in about 18 months, from just under 1 million to over 4 million. And again, for me, that felt easeful, but for the business owner, it was just chaos after chaos. She would create just all of these problems because she couldn't hold the sense of responsibility that came with 400K months. And so
Yeah, I can
it
totally see that.
was, right? So it's wild. The inner work around your leadership, and your leadership starts absolutely in here, is going to be required if you want to scale, whether that's, from 5K to 50K months, even from 5K to 20K months. Sometimes it just requires a different set of responsibilities.
Wow. How do you personally stay regulated with all your clients and the work that you do?
Mm-hmm. I take my regulation very, very seriously because I feel that anyone who holds space for other people, if we are not doing the regulation to show up very clear, I'm doing a disservice to my clients. And because we do deep activating work a lot of the time, I do feel that the responsibility to that is huge. So things that I do, I move my body every single day. That is a non-negotiable for me. I absolutely check in. I meditate, whether that's a meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's free writing. It's all sorts of different things in terms of really understanding where I'm at on a day-to-day basis. But I am very aware. I am in therapy regularly. I go to energetic attunements quite often, whether that's Reiki, cranial sacral, things like that. I do not drink alcohol. I find that has just cleared my ability to be more present. So that's been about 2 years now that I have not had a drink of alcohol. I don't drink caffeine.
Oh, wow.
So
No coffee?
I do. Right. I do try to sugar. I'm still having, I still am a vicious cycle with sugar, but I find that the more grounded I am in my physical being, the more clear and confident I think I am in the way that I can hold space for my clients. And so we go to a lot of pretty deep places together, and that I take that very, very seriously, the responsibility of that space very, very seriously. And so I spend a lot of time attuning into my own self to make sure that what is mine and what is theirs, and there's no sort of entanglement happening.
That totally makes sense. Yeah, because even with myself, when I talk about money with other women or taxes, it's very heavy.
Yeah. It's triggering, right?
Yeah.
It's you can almost feel their
Yeah.
nervous system. And I'm sure you'll start noticing this now. You'll all of a sudden go, oh, something's happening there for them, right? Very
Yeah.
few women, I imagine, come into that conversation easefully, joyfully, and really grounded, right? In their
It's always
calmness.
like
It's
panic and stress.
exactly right. And it's just like, even for you, it'd be amazing, even if you just took 3 minutes at the beginning of your sessions with them, to just be like, let's just connect into your breath. Let's just connect into your body for a second. It is safe to have these conversations. Like, it would probably be a game changer for pretty much everyone
Wow.
for that meeting. You should do
That's
that.
such a good idea.
Yeah,
I'm gonna try it on the next one.
absolutely. Let me know how it goes.
I will for sure. What are your thoughts on like women tying their worth to like the amount of money in their bank account or like
Mm.
how
Mhm.
successful their business looks?
Mhm. Mhm. Mm. This is a big topic. So, foundational principles, and one of my missions here on this earth is to untangle how we have been conditioned to perceive success.
Hmm.
So we were born, we were told that we get a good job, we go to
Yeah.
school, we get a good job, we get married, we buy a house, we have children. We're great
Yeah.
mothers. We do it all. We are the PTA president. We bake sale it up. We have a, rockin' career. We bring in, sometimes we're the breadwinners, but we definitely bring in an income. And that's kind of what we've been told is our definition of success.
Right.
And I think that that's probably one of the most dangerous narratives that's out there, to be honest. The work that I do with women is we actually just completely rework. Like, we start with vision always, because understanding how it is that we desire to show up in our lives, when we start to peel back the conditioning, looks very different for each woman. It looks
Hmm.
very different. And so we set up the definition of success very early so that we understand what it is that we are actually building here. This notion that we have to go out and look a certain way,
Hmm.
again, has been amplified by social media and this like
Right.
constant comparisonitis that we all seem to have to a degree. And again, that is really rooted in the fact that we are sort of just going along with what we think we should be doing, instead of
Right.
developing a deeper relationship with self to understand what it is that we actually really want. I know that when I started, after I had children, I really decided once they got to school, I was like, actually, my definition of success is not to have to be climbing the corporate ladder. It is actually to be able to drop and pick up my kids from school. And how can I create a life? How can I create a business that supports that vision? How can I go on field trips? How can I make sure that I am not working 24/7 through summer? And that became sort of the driving force. And really the first time that I allowed myself to go, maybe looks a little different than how I've been told. Maybe this looks like less, not more.
Yeah. Just you being
Maybe
open
it
to
looks
that conversation.
right. Maybe it looks more simple than I thought. Maybe like a yacht isn't as necessary to me as I thought it was, you know? Like,
Yeah.
and it's not to say like, if you want a yacht, have a yacht. But like, so many of us do not stop and ask deeply our own souls, what do we
Yeah.
want? Right? Not the
Right.
noise of what we've been told we should want. And so it's about developing that relationship first and foremost, because that's the starting point really for all of my work. And a lot of the time the women will be like, shoot, I've kind of built the wrong business. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I like working with women who are just sort of starting off in the process, because we can actually look at all of those, the business model, like we can look at the logistical pieces, the strategic pieces, and go, does this make sense for you? Because if you don't want to work 24/7, maybe owning a retail space is not the best idea for you. And so it so often comes back to, let's define what that means for you first and foremost. I wanted to be able to work anywhere from my laptop. That was like I will not work anywhere physically. That has been amazing. I can now work when my kids are at soccer practice if I need to. I can work when we're on vacation if that's something that comes up. I can host a group call or a group client session from literally anywhere, right? And so that for me felt like freedom. And so I was like, okay, so I need to build a business model that supports that. That is one of my key indicators of success. And a lot of the time, success does not have to equal a certain amount of money that some influencer is telling us we need to be making on the internet.
Right.
It's about looking at, what is the lifestyle I want to live? How much is that going to cost me? And how do I create a business model that is going to support that lifestyle? It's like reverse engineering it, kind of.
That totally makes sense.
Right? It's so fun too. It's just like, oh, like we could create. And that's the thing about being an entrepreneur. And that's really, to be honest, why I love working with entrepreneurs. I can create freedom in, anyone, but someone who's an entrepreneur, it's like we can get there way faster. We can get there way faster because we can decide. We can decide, are we going to do group programs? Are we going to do one-to-one? Like, what's the ceiling of one-to-one versus group? It's like we can look at all of those things and start to map out the strategy to be able to support the lifestyle. And then on the flip side, we make sure our nervous system is like poised and like, yeah, let's go. That feels juicy versus no, I can't do that because of this limiting belief and this story that belonged to my parents, right?
How do you like tune out the outside noise and like the social media? Because I feel like we're so consumed by it and we just lost like our sense of self and what we actually want.
Yeah. It's hard. Like, I'm going to be honest. It's really tricky you have to be really committed to building a practice around sense of self.
Right.
And once you build that practice, it becomes almost automatic that you're like, oh, that's just noise. That's actually not how I feel because I'm checking in with myself on the regular. I think when we are constantly going into our own selves, we begin to detach more and more from what is externally being fed to us. And it's not, again, like I am all for looking at someone and being like, yeah, she's got it going on. And that is an inspiration to me. That is an inspiration to me. I absolutely want to take my career there. That's different than going, ooh, I need that. I'm going to try and replicate that. I'm jealous of that, or I'm comparing myself to that, right? Because we're all on our individual journeys, and your nervous system is different from my nervous system, different from someone else's. And the stories that we've been told and taught and sold are all going to look a little bit different based on where we grew up, our ethnicity, our socioeconomics, where we were in the world. And so it's all of that needs to sort of be filtered through that, because it's happening automatically anyways. It's all getting filtered through all of that, right? As soon as we see something. So it's just really about making sure that we understand that we can use those things on the internet. I think the internet has been like one of the most incredibly amazing things that have happened, because we get to connect with like-minded people all over the world. It's amazing. But also, it can be super harming if we're not checking ourselves constantly and going, how is this making me feel? Is this inspiring me to my next level? Is this giving me like an example of what I can work towards? Or am I leaving my doom scroll feeling, really gross, terrible, and down about where I'm at in my life? And so it's just about differentiating the two. But boundaries are really important and so hard, because it's really easy. Sometimes you're like, oh, I'm just going to quickly check, or I'm going to quickly post something. And then you're like 45 minutes later, you're like, what am I even doing here? And so I've curated my feed to really inspire me. It's full of women and full of people really who are just doing phenomenal, great, expansive work in the world. And I get excited about that. If I land on someone and I get the sense that like maybe all is not what it seems, I don't end up following those people because I can tell that vibrationally they're just not necessarily a match for what I want to pop up in my feed every day.
Yeah, I've had to like unfollow so many accounts too and so many coaches that just didn't align anymore.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's such a beautiful way to protect your energy, right? You get to
Right.
protect your own nervous system to be like, yeah, that's not feeling good. And it's okay to leave it. They might have even served you really well in a season of your life. And now you've kind of outgrown that and you're ready to move on to someone who, is better suited for where you're at.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like we could talk for hours.
I feel like we could talk for hours too. I think that money and women and the nervous system, it's like everything. It's
Right.
everything.
What's the best way for our audience to connect with you?
Oh, that's a great question. So I mostly hang out on Instagram. I'm like trying to be on LinkedIn, but it's not working very well. So the best place is it's just nicola.c.harris. And you can also visit my website at www.nicolaharris.com. And I would love to connect. If you have any questions, just even on our interview, please feel free to DM me. I love to voice note back and forth. And if you're like, oh, I was just thinking about this, then I would love to dive in that with you. It's so much fun to talk about nervous system and just where we can really work it to be able to work for that next level of where we want to go.
Yeah, totally. I'll share all of Nicola's details in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me on her wealthy mindset.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Cindy. It's been a true pleasure.